This list is not the definitive edition. I'm going to use the cursed words there. It's not the definitive edition. If you disagree with either my Game of the Year list or my worst Games of the Year list, I'm okay with it. E-hugs. It's okay. We have different opinions, all right? Now with that out of the way, let's talk about the 5 worst games that came out in 2021 for me personally. Mind you, let's just put a disclaimer out there. I didn't play GTA Definitive Edition. I didn't play Battlefield 2042. So my list will be wildly different from most content creators out there, I would imagine. But let's not wait any longer. Let's get this started. And of course, let me know what the worst games of 2021 are for you down below. Biomutant is a game I wanted to love so bad. And it's a statement for what this list also is. Because to me, sometimes the worst games are the most disappointing ones. It's not that Biomutant is a really bad game. In a lot of ways, for 20 developers, you could consider Biomutant impressive. But I feel like game direction and design is more important than ever. And in an industry where everyone's trying to create bloated, open-world experiences, Biomutant fell prey to their own ambition, desiring to make an open world game with kung fu combat, tons of choices, meaningless dialogue. Everything about it feels paper thin because they never gave themselves the time, the manpower, or the resources to focus on any one of these mechanics to actually truly work and feel good to use. Yes, there is a novelty to exploring this very colorful world using kung fu action and then riding the back of like a robot horse or getting into a mech. It's cool to say this game does a lot of things, but in reality, this game does none of them, I feel, well. And its ability to try to tell this somewhat impactful thematic story on environmentalism and how we're going to destroy ourselves if we stay on this path, and the choices you can make to escape or not escape end up being ways to just opt out of content. And the story is left with gaping holes. It's just not designed well. From top to bottom, Biomutant I found was unfun and unsatisfying when it could have been so much more. I will say, out of everything on this list, this is the one I hope gets a sequel with more resources and more manpower to take these ideas, evolve them, and make them worth caring about. And while I covered Biomutant before launch, I really wanted to love it. There's just a lot missing here that makes it feel super incomplete, landing at number 5. Yeah, this one's gonna be agreeable, I'm sure. The Ascent at number 4. Oh yeah, we're going there. I remember when I dropped my review for The Ascent. Oh man, did I get dragged for it. A lot of people were barking up my tree saying how stupid I was, how wrong I was, how negative I'd become. It was slander city for your boy. But it's interesting to see as time went on and as the game showed how broken it was, not only on a balance level, but on a technical level, that it just wasn't ready. I know a lot of people probably think I'm picking on the small devs here. This is a game that came from a team of 12 developers, an Xbox and PC exclusive, but this looked to be the cyberpunk Diablo game we had never seen before. A true graphical showcase with a world that was equally captivating. This looked like the one for me this year, and you should be surprised this isn't at number 1, but it also speaks to just how this year ended for me, to say the least. I feel like The Ascent had so much promise, but its gameplay, especially its traversal, the load screens, the rubber banding where I'd go into a level 8 area and I'm running into level 20s, getting my ass kicked for no reason. This game, above all the others on this list, pissed me off to no end. I wish so much that they could have gone into The Ascent and just tweaked the math. because that was what was wrong with this game. But I hate to break it to everyone, action RPGs are all about math. The second that enemies get too spongy, too annoying, too one-hitty is right when your game starts to fall apart. It's why they're one of the hardest game genres to design for, because it's really hard to make it feel good for the player. And this is a prime example of what happens when it goes wrong, because it doesn't matter how good your world looks, how colorful it is, when it's not fun to play, that's all there is to it. It also doesn't help that the story here doesn't go anywhere. There's so many new factions and corporations that they try to just pull in out of thin air and go, whoa, you knew about this, didn't you? And you just have no clue what they're even referencing. And then the game ends. And they're like, sequel bait, see you in a couple of years. I was in awe when I completed. I went, that was it? And I know I have those moments often. I go, okay, like, how did they come to this? And I think about it a little bit. This was the first that was it moment I've had in years. Overall, the Ascent left me so sorely disappointed that it stuck with me since it launched in August. And even with Game Pass, I can't recommend it being a download, because when you looked at it on a technical level, the Ascent just disappointed and didn't work. That was the other thing. I played it on Series X where it was somewhat functional, but on PC, it was busted up until a couple of patches later. And on Series X, they did a patch and it became broken. And that's when suddenly all of the critiques about me started to turn around. I don't care at the end of the day. I'm going to have my opinion. I'm going to own it. I make sure I, feel pretty confident about it before I put it out there. But it's interesting to see how the conversation for the Ascent has really turned around. But now, let's move to some more agreeable territory, shall we? Grab your pillow for this one. The Medium was the most boring shit I played all year. What were they thinking? This looks like a Silent Hill inspired title that was to be creepy, atmospheric, and certainly the soundtrack does its job. But beyond that, I'm the easiest target on planet Earth. You could scare me with a bunny blanket. And this game did not have me wiggling in my chair like, oh God, I'm a little nervous here, taking off my headset, like one earphone off in case I had to run away. None of that. It had me doing none of that. This game was not even remotely atmospheric. It was a light puzzle game at best, but what a snooze fest because there was no gameplay. I know a lot of people try to slander titles by going, walking sim, walking sim, walking sim. The Medium well and truly is a walking sim, but even then, that would almost be doing the game a service because of how little truly happens here. I thought that there was so much potential in what they showed off, and I thought this had a chance to be a really cool experimental Xbox exclusive. It was also a very telling sign to me at first, like, oh boy, Xbox is heading into 2021 on not the best footing, but fortunately they did find their footing later in the year with the likes of Psychonauts and Forza, but oh my word. Again, it's that same story of this didn't deliver narratively, it didn't deliver atmospherically, it didn't deliver on a character level, the gameplay was non-existent. It was just one of those games where I'm sure a lot of you out there have played those 60 to 100-hour games where they start to drag, but you just need to finish it. And of course, as a game reviewer, I don't regret my time spent because everything I play can't be good. But this is one of those where even though it was like 9 hours, this felt like an eternity because of the snail's pace everything in this game goes at. Avoid at all costs. On the opposite of a snail's pace is Far Cry, which is so frantic like every other Ubisoft open world game that, my God, do they just have you trying to get your attention pulled one way or another using what they call the 30-second rule, where it's like, here's a new objective, 30 seconds later, and here's another one. And go check this out. Something always begging for your attention. Far Cry 6, though, is where the Ubisoft formula, I think collectively, became really stale. Far Cry 6 also showed to me that Ubisoft needs to get the fuck over themselves with Far Cry 3. And if they're not getting over themselves because it's not a cocky move, they need to stop being scared. Because they have too popular of an IP to sit there in the corner and keep rinsing and repeating Far Cry 3. They had the flamethrower mission, they had the drug missions, the hallucinations. You name anything in Far Cry 3. And if you played and beat the game, I mean anything in Far Cry 3. And they brought it back for 6. This company is creatively bankrupt. They took a fantastic actor in Giancarlo Esposito and wasted any screen time he had, which was minimal, by the way, not even presented in your face. And it just became this senseless adventure that some people go, oh, I love the popcorn explosions. I'm sorry, I can be game for that. I don't even think this game did that all too well. I thought it was boring to play. It was the same crap. The ammo type switching could have been something that I feel actually made the gameplay diverse as I change my loadouts and I go to the workbench and alter my weapons. But just like every Far Cry game, within the first hour, you find that weapon, that silenced weapon, and you pick heads all over a base and boom, there it is. Yay, progression. And they give you another reward. And it's just this constant carrot at the end of the stick. And as someone who's an RPG fan who lives and dies by the carrot at the end of the stick, this game does not know, and this developer does not know how to handle that properly and with respect for the player's time, to the point of emailing them and going, hey, where'd you go, man? I'm disappointed you're not playing. Gee, I wonder why this is the first game they're sending them out for. It's almost as if they needed to remind people this game existed, because I'm sure it did just fine. But I'm sure those who picked it up went, huh, yeah, this is pretty familiar. And if you don't believe me, I would hate for you to go and try it for yourself. But just be warned. If you played Far Cry 3, you've played Far Cry 6. So I said let's move into agreeable territory. That was temporary. Here we go. My worst game of the year, and if you've listened to me for a while, you already know this. So this won't come as a surprise, but if you're a new listener, apologies. Deathloop was the most disappointing game of 2021. I would consider myself, to some extent, an arcane games aficionado, adoring the likes of Dishonored 1, which is one of my favorite 360 games, Dishonored 2, which is one of the best stealth games ever made, Dishonored Death of the Outsider, which beautifully wrapped up the narrative for a series that really didn't even need to have a good story, and Prey, one of the best science fiction games that you can find out there to this date. They had the cream of the crop when it came to immersive sim stealth games with real choice at its core. And Deathloop just shows up with nothing but smoke and mirrors for me. Everything that's presented as a real, tangible choice is not that. The time loop is nothing more than guided mission objectives. The different objectives at different times are meaningless, especially when you put it in comparison to Hitman 3, which truly is characters moving around the map in real time having true tangible schedules, where even Deathloop's AI was completely broken to the point of mainstream media claiming that that was a part of the design of the game. And then you looked at the 10 out of 10s it got, and I won't lie, I don't care what people enjoy. If you're enjoying it, have fun. But this was the first time in a while I found myself continuously incensed by the adoration of a game, because it fell well below the mark of anything they've previously done, and it looked like a bunch of people in the industry fell for one trick in my eyes. It's that the smoke and mirrors of this time loop, which eventually puts you on this very guided path, which has always been there, everyone bid on. And that's fine if you enjoyed it. But to give this game a 10 was something so wild and out of this world to me, I still have trouble understanding. And I was told and watched many reviews on how this was the platform of the future, but on a technical level, on a design level, on a stealth level, on a gameplay freedom level, Deathloop is absolutely falling below the mark of everything Arcane had built previously. And all this says to me is that this was the first Arcane game I feel a lot of people managed to get through. And as someone who's played them all through multiple times, this game to me, on a level of interactivity with the environment, even just being an immersive sim, it was so unimaginably disappointing as I went through these lifeless, really narrow environments. You remember in Dishonored in 2012 on the Xbox 360 and PS3 when you found these unimaginably tall rooftops and you could blink your way up there? Dishonored 2 especially, these wide open environments. And then you have something like Upton in Deathloop, which is like 3 roads that are really narrow and you can't even reach the rooftops. You can't go inside buildings because they had to put some weird multiplayer mechanic in there that really doesn't add much to the game. Some may think it's strange because I got hung up on the scores when I'm trying to talk about why the game's disappointing. But what's disappointing is I feel like Arcane were masters of the craft for years and years. And then they come out and they get 10s for what I think is their worst work yet. And it's called the platform of the future. It's a new genre incoming, which I don't even get. It's as crazy as someone calling Kojima's Death Stranding a strange genre. Whatever that is. And knowing that they're going to look at that and simplify all their stuff when they were best known for their depth. And I get it from a business perspective. Arcane games have struggled to sell, and they only got played when they came to Game Pass. So I get it. But it's a tough pill to swallow. And to me, Deathloop could have been so much more, but on a technical level, it didn't work that well. The AI was not responsive. Navigating levels was a snooze fest because of that. And of course, with the environments themselves being very narrow, it made it all the more boring. And eventually, you had a game you could zip through very quickly. And at the bare minimum, you'd think there would be variety and replayability there for the time loop, a game that's infrastructure is built for that. And it's not. And when you look at Dishonored 2, where you could pick between 2 protagonists, 2 sets of powers, I remember when I posted my review for Deathloop, I was so confident with it, thinking to myself, who's going to disagree? The internet surprises you a lot. And I'm sure, again, people will be very disappointed with this pick. But I got to tell you how it is. Deathloop is the worst game of 2021 in my opinion. And if you're going to play anything from Arcane, go elsewhere first and then hop into Deathloop and see if you have the same opinion. Obviously, that doesn't apply to everybody, but I think a lot of you will be in agreement if you've played Arcane's previous work. So those are my top 5 worst games of 2021. I'm sure a list that will be very agreeable. So let me know what you're thinking of all of this, as well as your lists, in the comments down below. I'd have to say last year was a lot easier, and there wasn't going to be as much controversy. While I threw Animal Crossing in there, having Godfall and Avengers made things a lot easier, right? So, ladies and gentlemen, please fire away. Looking forward to seeing your thoughts, both good and bad. And I'll talk with you very soon. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.